There are some moments that remind you that arrogance has a shelf life. That the version of yourself you present when you think you are the most important person in the room has a way of meeting the real world eventually, usually at the worst possible time, usually in front of exactly the audience you least expected. And there are some people in this world who have been working too hard for too long and getting too little credit for it to sit quietly when someone decides, right in front of them, that they do not count. This is a story about both of those things. It is a story about a man who walked onto the Family Feud stage believing he was the most interesting person there, and a woman who proved, without raising her voice, without making a scene, and without asking anyone's permission, that he was wrong. It is also a story about Steve Harvey, about the specific kind of quiet authority that belongs to a person who has worked every kind of job and knows exactly what it costs to get up and do it again the next day. If you have ever been underestimated, overlooked, or talked down to by someone who confused their paycheck with their worth, this one is for you. Hit that like button and subscribe right now, because stories like this one are exactly why we are here, and we will keep bringing them every single week. Now let us talk about what happened on that stage. The Carter family from Detroit, Michigan applied for Family Feud in the spring of 2024. They were, by any honest measure, a family built on work. Not the kind of work that gets celebrated at galas or featured in magazine profiles. The kind of work that keeps everything running in the background, while everyone else is moving through their days without thinking too hard about who made the food, stocked the shelves, or kept the building clean. The team captain was 51-year-old Gloria Carter, who had worked the overnight shift at a grocery store distribution warehouse in Detroit for the past 19 years. She was a floor supervisor now, responsible for a team of 14 people, and a section of the warehouse that processed tens of thousands of units every single night. She had earned that position by showing up, by doing the work, and by being the kind of person her colleagues trusted enough to follow, not because she had a title above her name, but because they had watched her in the hard moments and seen what she was made of. Her son Marcus, 29, worked as an HVAC technician, the person you call when the heating breaks in January and you have a baby in the house. Her daughter Kezia, 26, was a certified nursing assistant at a memory care facility, working 12-hour shifts caring for residents who often could not remember her name, but whose faces she knew better than most people knew their closest friends. Gloria's sister, 55-year-old Patris, rounded out the team, a school cafeteria worker who had been feeding children in the Detroit public school system for 22 years, and who had, during the early months of the pandemic, helped coordinate free meal pickups for families in her district 7 days a week because she understood, with the specific clarity of someone who had spent 2 decades watching which kids came in hungry, that the food could not wait. 5 people whose combined working hours in a single week would have exhausted most people in a single day. 5 people who had never once been on television, never been profiled anywhere, and who applied to Family Feud because Kezia thought it would be fun, and because Gloria decided that her family deserved a day of doing something just for the joy of it. The competing family that day was the Hartwell family from a suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. The team captain was 48-year-old Richard Hartwell, who introduced himself to Steve Harvey during the pregame with the particular confident speed of someone who has introduced himself to important people many times and has a practiced version of the introduction ready at all times. Richard was the founder and CEO of a mid-sized logistics software company. He was not shy about this. He mentioned it 3 times in the first 90 seconds of his pregame segment, once when Steve asked what he did for a living, once when he explained why his family was particularly good at strategy, and once in a context that, to be fair, did not obviously call for it at all. He wore a suit jacket to the taping, which is not technically unusual, but is also not what most Family Feud contestants do, and he carried himself in the way of people who have spent enough years being deferred to that they have begun to assume deference is simply their natural environment. His family was pleasant. His wife Lisa was warm and funny. His 2 adult children were energetic and likable. His brother-in-law Patrick was quick and relaxed. The problem was not the Hartwell family. The problem was Richard Hartwell, and specifically the way Richard Hartwell began behaving in the moments between the formal segments of the taping, the brief pauses, the setup moments, the transitional beats when the cameras are technically still rolling but the focus has shifted, and people tend to let their guard down and be more of who they actually are. It started during the pregame, when Steve was moving between the 2 families doing warm-up questions. He asked Gloria what she did for work. She told him the warehouse, the overnight shift, the 19 years, the team she supervised. She said it plainly and without either apology or false modesty, the way people describe their work when they are not ashamed of it but also do not need anyone to make a fuss about it. Steve nodded with genuine appreciation and started to follow up. And from somewhere in the direction of the Hartwell podium, just loud enough to reach the right ears, came a comment from Richard Hartwell that landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. He said that it must be nice to have a job where you could turn your brain off. He said it to his wife, in what he apparently believed was a private aside. It was not private. The ambient microphones that sit throughout the Family Feud set, the ones that capture audio from every angle for the production team, picked it up clearly. Several members of the studio audience in the nearest rows caught it. Marcus, Gloria's son, standing at the Carter podium, turned his head slowly in the direction it had come from. Kezia looked at her mother. Gloria did not turn her head at all. She simply looked straight ahead at Steve Harvey with an expression that was entirely unreadable, which, if you knew anything about Gloria Carter, was itself a kind of answer. Steve Harvey had heard it. He went still in the particular way he goes still when something is registered that he is not going to let pass. It was not an explosive stillness, not the kind that announces itself. It was the quiet kind, the kind that takes up more space the longer it goes on. He finished the question he was asking Gloria, gave her the full attention of his response, and then he turned, unhurriedly, with the deliberate pace of someone who has decided exactly what they are about to do, toward the Hartwell podium. "Mr. Hartwell," Steve said. His tone was conversational. Not cold exactly, but not warm either, the tone of someone conducting a careful transaction. "Did you have something you wanted to add to what Gloria was saying?" Richard Hartwell, who had not expected to be addressed on this specific subject, smiled the smile of a man recalibrating. "Oh no, we were just chatting over here." "Okay," Steve said. He let that sit for a moment. Then he turned back to Gloria. "Gloria, how long did you say you've been at that warehouse?" 19 years, Gloria said. 19 years, Steve repeated, and now there was something deliberate in the repetition, a weight being put on those two words, a small act of insistence that they be heard properly. "And you said you supervise a team." 14 people, Gloria said. "Overnight shift, 5 nights a week." Steve nodded slowly. He looked at the audience. 14 people, overnight, 19 years. He paused for exactly one beat, then looked directly at Richard Hartwell. "That sounds like somebody who's been using their brain for a pretty long time." The audience responded. Not with wild applause, with the specific, warm sound of people who have just watched someone be seen accurately and want to affirm it. Gloria pressed her lips together and dipped her head slightly, not with embarrassment and not with false modesty, but with the particular grace of someone who is being acknowledged and is accepting it without performance. Richard Hartwell laughed in the way people laugh when they are hoping laughter will function as an exit from a situation. Steve did not move on immediately. He was not finished. "I want to talk about something," Steve said to the audience and the cameras, and in his tone was the signal that this was not going to be a throwaway observation, but something he had actually decided to say. "People talk a lot about what a job says about a person, but they usually mean it going one direction, like the bigger the title, the more the person is worth paying attention to." He paused. "I grew up watching people work jobs that nobody gave any awards for, jobs that started before the sun came up or ended after it went down. Jobs where you stood on your feet all day, or lifted things all day, or cleaned things all day, or fed people all day. And not one of those people I watched was not using every single thing they had to do what they did." He turned back to Gloria. "How much does your job pay, if you don't mind me asking?" Gloria told him. It was a number that was not small and was not large, the number of someone who had worked their way up in a job that the market undervalues and that 19 years of loyalty had improved somewhat but not transformed. Steve looked at the audience again. "And she's responsible for 14 people. For the movement of product that eventually ends up in the stores where all of us buy our groceries." He let that land. "Tell me again which job it is that doesn't require a brain." Richard Hartwell's smile had become fixed in the way of someone who is waiting for a situation to conclude so they can regroup. His wife Lisa was looking at her hands. His adult children had developed a sudden interest in the floor. The audience, for its part, was giving Steve Harvey the kind of attention that audiences give when they understand that something real is happening, and they do not want to miss any of it. It was Patris, Gloria's sister, the cafeteria worker, standing at the far end of the Carter podium, who said the thing that nobody asked her to say, but that the moment had clearly been building toward. She said it quietly, not to the camera, not to Steve Harvey, but to the room in general, the way you say something when you have been holding it and the pressure finally exceeds the container. "We keep this country running," she said. "People like us, every single day, and most days nobody says thank you." Steve Harvey turned toward Patris and looked at her for a long moment. Then he said with a conviction that was completely unperformed, "She is absolutely right. And I want everyone watching this right now to understand what I am about to say. Every single job that gets done honestly, that somebody shows up to and does with effort and integrity, that job has dignity. It does not matter what it pays. It does not matter what it's called. It does not matter whether the person doing it has a corner office or a time clock. The dignity is in the doing, always." He looked back toward Richard Hartwell. His voice was still calm. There was nothing punishing in his tone, but there was also nothing accommodating in it. "Mr. Hartwell," Steve said, "I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think about it before you answer. Do you know the name of the person who cleans your office?" Richard Hartwell's fixed smile shifted into something more uncertain. He did not answer immediately. "Do you know the name of the person who serves lunch in your building?" Steve continued. "Do you know the name of the person who drives the delivery truck that brings the supplies your company needs to operate?" He paused. "I'm not asking to embarrass you. I'm asking because I think the answer might be worth sitting with." There was no drama in what came next. Richard Hartwell did not become a villain. He did not storm off or double down in the way that would have made this a simpler, more satisfying story. What he did, and what several members of the studio audience later described as the moment that surprised them most, was get quiet for a moment, look at Gloria Carter, and say, without his earlier polish, without the practiced self-presentation, that he did not know those names, and that hearing it said out loud that way made him understand he probably should. It was not a grand redemption. It was not a speech. It was a small, genuine moment of a person encountering something true about themselves and deciding, in real time and in front of witnesses, not to run from it. And whatever Richard Hartwell was before he walked onto that stage, that moment gave him an opportunity to become something slightly different, to carry something out of that studio that had not been there when he walked in. Gloria Carter watched all of this with the same composure she had brought to 19 years of overnight shifts and difficult days and moments when the world had communicated in various ways that her work was not worth much. She watched it and she accepted it, and then she did the thing that was most characteristic of her. She moved on. The game was starting. She had a family to lead. She had work to do. The Carter family played Family Feud with the specific energy of people who are used to performing under pressure without anyone noticing or applauding. They were quick and practical and funny in the dry, economical way of people who work with their bodies and their minds at the same time every single day, and have developed a very efficient sense of humor as a survival mechanism. Kezia, who worked 12-hour shifts in a memory care facility and had learned to read what people needed from the smallest signals, turned out to be extraordinary at intuiting what answers a survey of 100 people was most likely to give, which, when you think about it, is exactly the skill set her job had spent years building in her. Marcus, the HVAC technician, was fast and unflappable. Patris, the cafeteria worker who had said the truest thing said on that stage all day, played with the relaxed confidence of someone who has been doing hard things in front of other people, without recognition for long enough, that a television camera is not going to change her fundamental relationship to herself. Gloria herself was remarkable, not flashy, not performing, simply precise in the way of someone who has been leading a team in a high-pressure environment for years and knows how to make good decisions quickly. She gave answers that hit, moved on from the ones that missed without visible distress, and kept her team's energy exactly where it needed to be throughout the game. They advanced to the fast money round. Marcus went first and scored 143 points. Gloria went second, and with 4 answers that hit in the top 2 positions across the board, brought the family's total to 317 points, enough to win $20,000. When the buzzer sounded and the total went up and Steve Harvey turned to the Carter family to tell them they had won, Gloria Carter did not jump or scream. She put her hands over her mouth. She closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. And then she opened them, looked at her family standing around her, and started to cry, not with surprise, because she had worked too hard and known herself too long to be surprised by her own ability, but with relief, with gratitude, with the specific emotion of someone who has been pouring effort into things that mostly go unnoticed for a very long time, and who has just been seen and won, and received something tangible for it in front of people who watched the whole thing happen. Steve Harvey handed her the check. He looked at her and said, "You know what I want you to do with this." Gloria smiled at him. What? Whatever you want, Steve said, because you earned it not just today, you earned this a long time ago. The episode aired 6 weeks later and generated one of the largest response volumes the show had seen in recent memory, not because of the confrontation with Richard Hartwell, though that clip circulated widely and generated substantial commentary across social media and labor advocacy communities. What drove the response was Gloria. Specifically, a clip of her receiving that check, with her hands over her mouth and her eyes closed, and the tears coming quietly down her face, that seemed to reach something in people that was hard to name but impossible to ignore. Working people shared it. Parents shared it. People who had spent years in jobs that nobody celebrated, doing work that nobody saw, shared it with the specific kind of ferocity that comes when something shows you something true about your own life that you had not yet found the words for. Workers' rights organizations and labor advocacy groups shared the full episode clip from the pregame, Steve's response to Richard Hartwell's comment, Patris's statement, the challenge about the names of the people who clean the office and serve the lunch and drive the delivery truck. That clip ended up in union meeting rooms and workplace equity trainings and classroom discussions about economic dignity and the gap between how work is compensated and how it is valued. Several prominent economists and labor journalists wrote about the way a game show segment had articulated something their own fields struggled to communicate because it had been demonstrated rather than argued, felt rather than explained. Richard Hartwell, for his part, made no public statement about the episode. His company's social media team quietly went offline for a few days after the broadcast. But several people who worked for his company later said, in online spaces, that something had shifted in how he moved through the office in the weeks following the airing, that he had started learning names, asking questions, engaging differently with the people in the building who were not in the rooms where the decisions got made. Whether that change lasted, whether it deepened or faded as the news cycle moved on, only the people inside that company could say. But it had started. Something in him had been reached by what happened on that stage, and the reaching was real, even if what grew from it remained to be seen. Kezia, who worked her 12-hour shifts at the memory care facility caring for residents whose families could not always be there, said in an interview she gave to a local Detroit news outlet 2 months after the episode aired that the thing she hoped people took from watching her family was not anything dramatic. She said she hoped people watched her mother receive that check and thought about someone in their own life who showed up and did hard work and got very little acknowledgement for it. She said she hoped they picked up the phone, or wrote a message, or just said the next time they saw that person, I see what you do. It matters. Thank you. She said that was it. That was the whole thing, that most people who are working jobs the world undervalues do not need a revolution. They need to be seen. They need someone to know their name. They need exactly what Steve Harvey had demonstrated was possible to give in less than 60 seconds, if you were willing to slow down and pay attention. Gloria Carter used part of the prize money to replace the car she had been driving to work for 11 years, a 2013 sedan with 180,000 miles on it that she had been coaxing through Michigan winters on willpower and maintenance prayers. She used another portion to help Kezia with a certification course she had been putting off because of the cost. She put the rest in savings with the careful, considered intentionality of someone who has managed money on a working person's budget for a very long time and knows exactly how much security a dollar can and cannot buy. She did not make a speech about it. She did not post about it. She told her family what she had done with it at Sunday dinner, and they ate together, and then they did the dishes, and then they went back to their lives, which is to say, back to the work. That is what this story is actually about. Not the confrontation, though the confrontation matters. Not the win, though the win matters. It is about Gloria Carter getting up at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night and going to work when most of the country is asleep. It is about Kezia learning the name and the favorite song and the childhood memory of every resident in her wing. It is about Marcus driving to someone's house in February and restoring the heat and driving home and doing it again the next day. It is about Patris making sure a child has something to eat and has been looked at by an adult who knows their name and is glad they showed up. It is about the invisible labor that makes everything else possible, and that gets discussed mostly in the abstract, until someone puts a face on it, and puts that face on television, and lets the world look at it for a few minutes, and remember what it has been forgetting. There is a version of success in this country that gets photographed and profiled and celebrated in the language of disruption and vision and leadership. And then there is the version that happens at 5 in the morning or 10 at night in a warehouse or a hospital wing or a school kitchen or a stranger's broken house, performed by people who do not use words like disruption or vision, but who are, in the most accurate sense of those words, the ones actually holding things together. The ones who know the names, the ones who show up, the ones who, when a game show camera finally turns in their direction, do not suddenly become someone different. They are just more visible, the same people they have always been, doing exactly what they have always done, deserving exactly what they have always deserved. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think of someone in your own life who does the work that keeps things running and who you have not recently told that you see them and that it matters, go do that today. Not tomorrow. Today. And share this story with someone who needs to hear it, because these are the stories that do not get told enough, and the people in them deserve more than one day's worth of attention. Leave a comment below and tell us who came to mind when you watched this, whose name you are going to say. This community listens to each other, and your voice here is part of what makes it worth coming back to. And if you are not already subscribed, do that right now, because every single week we come back with stories like this one. Stories about the people who show up, the people who do the work, the people who, when the world finally pays attention, stand there and say, yes, this is us. We have been here the whole time. We will see you in the next one.